Hello, so this is sort of an extension to the previous video. In the previous video, I was discussing my experience on my channel. Now, for the purpose of this video, I want to extend beyond that to my experience and my observations of cyberspace generally. I'm particularly thinking of social networking sites like Facebook. Facebook's one of the most prominent ones, and it's one that I personally use a lot. Um, but other forums as well, chat forums, social forums. But I am particularly thinking of YouTube and Facebook. I mean, they're the two that I use most, so that's what I can most associate with. Um, and how people interact online. I've covered this in various forms in other videos, but it's always topical. And it does tie in with the previous video somewhat, except I am expanding out. I feel the internet is the Wild West. Now, that shouldn't be taken literally. I'm half joking with that because actually the Wild West, the American frontier, wasn't actually quite as violent as sometimes believed. So, for example, 1940s Chicago was probably a lot more violent than the 1880s Arizona, believe it or not. Great documentary by Ken Burns on the West, but that's not here or there. Just an interesting side point. Anyway, just for the purpose of this video, because it's something that will presumably get people's attention, the Wild West. Um, that's what the internet is like. It is like you go into a bar and there's a gunfight. This is not to say that civil discussions don't take place, but I think so many people talking away online that they wouldn't necessarily talk like in real life. And I have to be absolutely candid here. I cannot say that I talk exactly the same way online as I would in real life. I try to be consistent. And certainly in the real world, if someone was to ask my opinions, I wouldn't shy away from giving them. But it is also true that I'm in confrontations or debates a lot more online than I would be in the real world. The real world, obviously, you see someone's body language, and there's obviously the chance of physical confrontation. Not that I would go up and deck someone because I don't agree with them, but I think there is a barrier online that people know about. Most of the people that comment online are not public figures, so they can almost afford to say reckless things and more or less get away with it. Public figures, it goes without saying, need to be a bit more responsible because they're under the spotlight. So if a politician or a TV presenter, occasionally a journalist, or someone who's a bit more in the public light says something controversial, you can be damn sure that the press is going to pick it up the next day. Like, this person says this person says that. And whilst that's understandable because it's part and parcel of what this is, it's also a pity that so often people are taken out of context and what they've actually said on something is distorted. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not sort of pandering to Trump's logic of fake news, like anything he doesn't agree with is fake news. I don't believe that. But I do believe that the press in particular, and I do say this in a generalizing way because even responsible newspapers do it, they will take a snippet of something that someone has said and present that as the whole thing of their belief. But it happens to everyone. It's just happened to me. I was discussing this issue of sexual harassment that's been coming up, obviously, because of the Harvey Weinstein allegations. And I made the point that, which I already said on this video, so I'm not going to go through it all again, but I made the point that it could have an impact on dating because some men are going to be reluctant to approach women for fear of being accused of sexual harassment. We could also have a situation, which I didn't mention in the video, where men might be reluctant to even offer help to women. Now, I clearly said in the post that sexual harassment is wrong and we should condemn it. I made that very clear. But unfortunately and predictably, there was people that chose to take it out of context and say, "Oh, this guy is condoning it." And I must admit, it got on my nerves because it's a distortion of what I said. Now, the UK has quite strict libel laws, That is to say, if you publish something about someone that is misquoting them or defaming them, you can take legal action against it. But the truth is, it happens so much online that realistically, it wouldn't be. You're not going to have a situation whereby people are going to say, "Oh, I'm going to libel you for saying that about me," because it's so common that it would almost be meaningless. Um, I mean, goodness knows the number of people have libeled me by taking my statements out of context. I'd have a field day. But I'm not going to do it because I don't fit. It would be something that would be very difficult to prove and very difficult to like go back on and etc. etc. A published newspaper report is a bit different. I still think though newspapers get away with a lot. So even in Britain, where libel laws are strict, there is an enormous amount that newspapers get away with, and they're smart about it because they won't directly lie about someone, but they will distort what someone has said, and that makes libel a bit of a grey area. If they're not directly lying, but they're taking a snippet of what someone has said, that's why it's very important that we always put a caveat. If we're trying to say something and we don't want to be misunderstood, it's very, very important that we all put that caveat so that if we are misunderstood, we can go back and say, no, look, I pointed that out. So, in other words, if in my case, I was accused of trivializing harassment, well, I could go back and say, well, you're wrong. You haven't read my post because I clearly said this is wrong. That's an example. But I think for public figures, the pressure is more, and their task with being more responsible with the words, which in a way is a pity. They shouldn't have to be. But that's the world that we live in, whereby people will formulate their opinions based on this 24-hour news cycle. They'll read a headline in the newspaper and respond to it. Now, to be clear here, I'm not lecturing, I'm not pontificating. I am absolutely as guilty as anyone else. Hand on heart, I have looked at news reports and not read them the whole way through and jumped to a conclusion based on something that was in the report. Um, so we are all responsible, and I include myself. We are all responsible for what we interpret, what we say. Of course, the other side of it is people can't complain about being misunderstood if they constantly say. I came across a woman recently on a forum, and she would make these absurd, sweeping statements, and then she would backtrack and take no responsibility and accuse people of victimizing her. But she clearly was making sweeping statements without any caveat. Um, and it would work people up. For example, she would say Islamic extremism doesn't exist, Islam is peaceful. It's all made up by right wing Westerners. She was a convert, and well, obviously, a lot of people took issue with that because it was so objectionable. But then she backtracked and denied that she was an apologist for Islamic extremism, which is what that statement would have indicated. So that's an example of why people need to be responsible for their own words. But people are also responsible for their own interpretations. See where I'm going with this? In short, we are all responsible. Even if we're not public figures, we are responsible insofar as how we interpret something, how we read something, and what we choose to believe. And it's a big thing with living in a democratic country where freedom of expression is sacred. Um, in other parts of the world where there is more of a focus on the collective, on the sort of body politic. What I mean by that is in a country like China, individual liberty doesn't count. It's about the collective good of the nation. There's some merits with that, but there's obviously also some drawbacks insofar as personal liberty is eroded. Um, but a side effect of that is that we see a lot less of this kind of I was going to say we see a lot less sort of viral, like this person said that, etc. But actually, even in China, you're starting to see a phenomenon where, especially celebrity sex scandals, are a huge thing in China. Like the latest pop star, who they have dated, etc. So in that sense, there isn't that much difference from Western gossip magazines. This would have been unthinkable during the 1960s in China. Um, So even there, some things are changing and not entirely for the better. But that's basically how I see it. Because the internet is a wild west, because it is so easy for people to misinterpret what others are saying, and because there is so little sanction on being misunderstood or misquoting someone else. I mean, I could disagree with someone and dislike them and just go and completely misquote what they've said. Nothing would happen to me. Occasionally, I might get a warning from Facebook, but you have like a few thousand staff, which is even more than I thought, but a few thousand staff policing 2 billion people. So we should sometimes remember that they can't do everything. But that's the thing. It's like anything goes. Clearly, there's certain things that would be picked up, or you would like to think would be picked up pretty fast, like child pornography, promotion of terrorism. Although Facebook has got into hot water for not acting fast enough to take down clearly pro-terrorist videos, videos of people being beheaded and so on. Whilst they have sanctioned other videos, but there's a lot of I think when you're a private individual, it matters a lot less because you're not going to have character assassination in the same way. Maybe within a particular thread, because people will say, "Oh, this guy's blah blah blah," but a week on from that thread, everyone will have forgotten about it. But if you're a public figure, unfortunately, it sticks. So, frankly, sometimes I sympathise with public figures because they have to be so careful what they say. Um, I mean, the pressure is enormous to get things right. I think one reason Trump has caused so much attention is because he really gives the impression he doesn't care. He says what he wants, and that's why he's polarizing. Because some people greatly admire that, other people see it as deeply reckless. I'm not a Trump fan, and I think a lot of the time he's been exposed as a liar. So for all his pontificating about fake news, he himself is far from honest. Um, he's been he's went back on many times on things he's clearly said, and that's another thing about public figures. They can't so easily hide from, oh, I didn't say that, because they're public figures, everyone can see what they have said. And in the case of an audio tape, true, you can edit them to some extent, but there are certain things that you can say and do that are pretty hard to escape from, no matter what distortion is involved. Say, for example, a politician's giving a press conference and they clearly say something inflammatory. They can't half an hour later say, "Oh, I didn't say that; it was taken out of context." As much as the press do take things out of context, that's direct. That isn't even people reading a newspaper or people listening to an editorial. It's from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So those are just a few things that I would ask people to think about, and I think this applies to absolutely everyone. Maybe some of the people watching this aren't as active as I am in terms of uploading videos or communicating online. I'm in a lot of different Facebook groups. I'm commenting pretty much every day on various news items. Sometimes I get fed up with it. Sometimes I just want to stop. But I know that the side effect of that will be I'll see something in the news. I'll think I'll want to comment on that. So I just stay linked to these news groups and so on. That's it. We all have responsibility for what we say, and we all have responsibility for what we interpret. Whilst I also think we shouldn't be too cautious, we should be honest. So let me know your thoughts, and thank you for watching.